It's excellent to be back in church, so it's great to welcome everyone here this morning, and it's great to know that lots of other people are joining us as well. Should say that now that we're able to get back into church, that doesn't mean it's very easy to do so. We actually need more people here to allow the church to open than we would normally. So there's a certain amount of organisation because of COVID that goes on. So as a result, we're not meeting every Sunday here in church. So we're going to meet alternate Sundays and joining together in Zoom on the other Sundays. But we're hoping to move as quickly as possible to being open every Sunday. And if you want to be here, obviously because of the numbers, you need to let us know. So phone in or email and tell us you want to come, and we'll make sure we keep within the numbers. So this is the season of Easter, and this is the season at the very heart of our faith. But what does Easter mean for us? For us. It was clearly great news for Jesus, and it was clearly an impressive action on God's part, what happened at Easter. But what does Easter mean for people like you and me? Well, it demonstrates something. It demonstrates the power of God over evil and death, the power of God to transform situations from defeat into victory, and from death to life, and from darkness to light. And Easter demonstrates the truth that God will always be with us, that nothing can separate us from God, and that God's love for us will never be stopped. But one of the things we talk about as Christians is about being saved. We're saved thanks to Easter, and we're saved by God. But what does that mean? Saved from what? I think we've got a tendency to see Easter as being about the past and the future, but not the present. In other words, Easter, first Easter, happened a long time ago. That's the past. And it means that we will end up with God when we die. Well, that's the future. Let's hope that's the future. So we've got the past and the future. But it's not actually about right now. It's not about today. Well, on Good Friday, just there, I alluded once again to that terrible story from the Middle Ages that still gets trundled out in churches even now to explain why Jesus had to die. And this awful story about God's anger, God's wrath. And the story includes certain so-called facts, like somehow every single person who ever lived deserves to be punished in hell, and the awful fact that somehow God won't even forgive one single person for the mistakes they've made in life, and the other so-called fact that God demands a blood sacrifice from an innocent person before God is willing to forgive us. Such an outrageous story. And as I've said before, of all the things the church has ever taught in history, I think this is the worst story ever. And we need to keep rejecting it. But if we do, and if we put aside this gruesome idea of God being against us and hating us and wanting to condemn us, if we put that all aside, what happens to the idea then of salvation? If Jesus died to save us, then who is he saving us from? What is he saving us from? What do we need saved from today? I was once organising a funeral in a woman's house. She was an elderly woman. She didn't really go to church, but it was clear that she had at some point. And we were talking about various things, and eventually I said, have you got any music you want sung at the service? And she said quite quietly, I'll have the grill. And I misheard her because I thought she said the grill. And I said, no, for the music. Is there anything you'd like for the music? And she said, yes, I would like the grill. And I said, for the music? Yes, I want the grill. So I said, the grill. And she said, yes, the shady grill. I want the shady grill. Now, I don't know if anyone understands what she was talking about, but I think if you're perhaps as old as me, or older still, you might know what she was talking about. She was talking about a song, a hymn that used to be sung in churches years ago called By Cool Siloam's Shady Rill. But instead of the shady rill, she wanted a shady grill. I find it hard to blame her because there are very few people who know what a shady rill is. What is a rill? At least we know what a grill is, but what is a... Does anyone know? Anyone know what a rill is? A rill? All of you shouting it at home that we can't hear you. A rill apparently is a stream, a shady stream. It's a bit of a crazy hymn. It's even more crazy when you realise it was written as a children's hymn. A children's hymn, and not even the adults understand the words. So, maybe not the greatest hymn, but she'd obviously heard that at a baptism or a funeral or something. And it stuck in her mind, so she wanted the grill. And it's perhaps an easy mistake to make. We hear words sometimes and we think we know what they are, and we don't. But I wonder if that same, we could ask questions about the words that we use in church, the words we might quite often use or we might quite often sing. Do we even know what they mean? So we started the service today with a song called Salvation Belongs to Our God. Salvation belongs to our God. In other words, God brings about salvation. And we don't need to go through the whole song, but we don't need to go beyond the first word. Salvation. What is salvation? A thing we sing about and we hear? Do we know what it means? My favourite theologian is Marcus Borg, and he once got involved in an all-age group of people who would discuss words and ideas, and they would try and work out what they all meant or what they felt these words meant. And one particular group he had was a group of people from all ages and all walks of life. And one of the words that came up was the word salvation. And so he said, what does that word mean to you? What is salvation? And he got some answers that you might expect. Somebody said, salvation was about the future, good news in the future. Somebody said, salvation means you're going to heaven. Salvation means going to heaven. And somebody said, being saved means that your sins have been forgiven. All of these, maybe you could say, were positive ideas to some extent, but there was also a kind of negative that went alongside it. There were people who felt in two minds about this idea of salvation. You see, being saved seems to mean that other people aren't saved. And it means that if we're saved, maybe other people won't be. And that means there's an in-group and there's an out-group. And there's the people who are really loved, and then there's the people who are not loved at all. And people felt, even if they thought they were in the in-group, they were thinking, that's not very nice for other people. And so they had a kind of negative connotation. Salvation is a big idea in the Bible. It's a big word, and it crops up all over the place. Mostly, it's got nothing to do with the next life. It's actually about this one, mostly. Now remember, in the Old Testament world, people didn't believe in an afterlife. Most people did not think there could be any more life than the life that was being lived now. They didn't think about eternal life. It wasn't in their heads. So when they talked about salvation, they were talking about God doing something to transform lives. It might be their own lives, or it might be even bigger, it might be the lives of lots of people. And so, for example, the greatest example of salvation in the Old Testament was the story of Egypt and the Exodus from Egypt. That time when the people of Israel, who were enslaved in this place, were able to break free, escape, and find freedom. So that was the central story. So salvation came by being set free from the bondage that they were under. They faced all kinds of problems, and they needed to escape. So they had economic problems because slaves are impoverished. Slaves have got no money. They don't have the ability to make choices that comes with having some money of their own. So that had to be fixed. They had political problems because they had no power, they had no voice, they had no say in anything that was going on round about them. They had religious problems because they were banned from worshipping God by Pharaoh. And all of these things were turned around when they escaped with God's help. Later on in the Old Testament, there was another time when a similar thing happened. The people of Israel were carted off and taken into captivity in Babylon. That was called the Exile. And once again, Israel needed saving. God's promise to them through that time was, I will be with you. I will bring you home. I will rescue you. God offered them love and assurance and hope. And eventually, they returned home again. So that was another big story of salvation for people then. To be saved is to be delivered from what ails us, whether as an individual or whether as a group. To be saved means to enter into a new life with God. Salvation is about being transformed. Today, in our readings, Jesus was talking about being the Good Shepherd. And it's hardly a surprise that the Old Testament psalm reading for today is the most famous psalm of all, Psalm 23. Psalm 23 has got great imagery in it, and that's why people love it so much. It's a lovely psalm. It's a lovely picture of God. God is going with us. The Lord is with us. The Lord is guiding us. The Lord is helping us. The Lord goes along the road as we're going along the road. It's a great picture of what Christ still does. Because Jesus is alive, we can still encounter him. And his Spirit can guide and empower us and help to rescue us when we're in trouble. And in today's gospel text, there's also these amazing words from John chapter 10, verse 10, where Jesus says, I have come that you might have life in all its fullness. In other words, I've come that you might have the best kind of life, a relationship with God, a life that becomes better. So what is salvation? Salvation is personal, and there's all kinds of picture language in the Bible to explain how that happens. There's going from blindness to seeing again, or going from blindness to seeing for the first time, or going from death into life. Some of us are pretty dead. Jesus made the point very well. Just as there are sighted people who are blind in some ways, so there are living people who are dead in some ways. Or maybe it's going from illness to health. Salvation is our wounds being healed and our health being restored to us again. Or maybe it's going from fear to trust. Do not be afraid is one of the most common phrases in the whole of the Bible. It crops up again and again. Why? Because lots of people are afraid. And Jesus told his followers not to be anxious, but to trust in God for everything. So salvation is a personal thing, and it's also more than personal. It's got a bigger than personal meaning. And that's why, as Christians, we have to concern ourselves with a bigger view than just our own personal situation. So Jesus has come to turn us from violence to peace, or from prejudice to acceptance, or from injustice to justice. Church leaders like Desmond Tutu often talk about God's dream for the world. In fact, Desmond Tutu's got a wee book which is actually called that, God's Dream. And that's what Jesus meant when he talked about the kingdom of God. God's kingdom, that's what that was. Our lives and this world as it ought to be, as it should be. We often feel cut off and separated. We often feel like we're exiled or we're alienated from life. We've got problems that weigh us down, and we need to be set free. And there are things around us in the world that clearly need addressing, and we need to be playing our part in helping sort things out. As humans, we all have struggles. We all face obstacles. We all have blind spots. We have Achilles heels. We have addictions. We have poor behaviours. We've got anger issues. And we can make some pretty stupid decisions. Now, all of us don't suffer from all of these things. But every one of us has our own issues. We all have some things that stop us being the people we could be. So if our lives are to get on track, and to be as fruitful as it can be, we need help to be set free from anything that stops living our life to the full. And Jesus comes along and says, I've come to bring life. I've come to bring life in all its fullness. Who doesn't yearn for that? Every one of us deep down yearns for that. So the message of salvation is not about something that's going to be needed one day when we die. It's about what we need now, to be the best we can be now, and to be set free from anything that's dragging us down. So clearly, this is good news for everybody. Life in all its fullness, the best kind of life. Who doesn't want that? It's what we all want. But what it means is different for every one of us. And that's okay. God treats us as individuals. God knows who we are. Jesus was and is always turning lives around and setting people free. Remember that story, the very famous story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was the wee guy, the tax collector. He got wealthy by working for the Romans and cheating his fellow citizens. So he got rich. He didn't have any friends. And then Zacchaeus meets Jesus, and Jesus decides he's going to spend some time with him, and he spends the afternoon in Zacchaeus' house. And it changes Zacchaeus forever. And he decides he's going to change his life around. And he gets out there, he gets into the public, and he announces to the world what he's going to do and in what way it's going to be different. And of all the people to pick, why did I pick him? Because remember what Jesus said? Jesus looked on that situation and Jesus said, salvation has come to this house today. Salvation. Zacchaeus has been saved at that moment. Jesus isn't saying, because I'm going to die on a cross in a wee while, eventually Zacchaeus could be saved in the future. He is saying Zacchaeus is saved because he's finally done the right thing. He's now on the right path. He's walking towards God instead of walking away from God. His life has been transformed, and in his particular case, it's happened almost instantly. This is salvation. To allow God to transform us into better people. So Easter comes along every year to remind us of what God can do. To take what seems like impossible situations and just turn them right around. Turn them in their head. God comes along and takes defeat, turns that into victory. Takes sadness, replaces it with gladness. Takes darkness and changes that into light. He takes remorse and shame and then brings healing and forgiveness. Takes despair and fills us with hope. Takes death and replaces that with new life. Easter demonstrated to the world the passion of God to work with us in making things better. And thanks to the message of this season, we know that we've got Jesus' Spirit with us always to inspire, aid, and empower us in that task. Thanks be to God.